Oh, she looks so good. Okay, look at this. Hey, I'm Kendra. I'm a staff writer at Epicurious, and today we're gonna be making a spiced tomatoey tuna noodle casserole. This is a dish I developed last year based on something I really love at a restaurant called Saint-Julie-Vert in Brooklyn. It's got this toasty pasta base, which is really fun and unique, and this brick red, super savory spiced tomato sauce. Gets crispy on top from a stint in the broiler. It's awesome. She's ready. Woo! So we're gonna go through the recipe today, and I'm gonna show you the reasons why we do every step we do. How to make an aioli from scratch, why you might wanna toast your pasta, and which tomato products work the best. So first thing, we're gonna preheat our oven to 375. This is a baked pasta, so you're gonna have that pre-cooked pasta base, and then when you bake it off, it's gonna get crispy on top. We're making a sofrito as our base here, which is just a bunch of vegetables that you cook down. It's kind of like the base of a sauce. Your base for this dish is just onion, garlic, and roasted red peppers, and you could finely chop them all by hand if you want, if you have the time, if you're very good with your knife. I am going to cheat a little bit and use a food processor. This is a really good tool for this. You can roughly chop your ingredients, pop them in here, and then pulse it a little bit, and you'll get everything in a nice, even mince. So we're gonna set that aside for a sec and prep our anchovies. If you don't like anchovies, you don't have to put it in there, but it really melts away into the sauce. Oh, really oily. And you won't even really taste it, but what it adds is like this deeply savory punch. So we're just gonna pull one bad boy out. We're gonna roughly chop him. Like I said, he'll melt away into the sauce when you cook him, so it's not like you're gonna ever come across like a chunk of anchovy when you eat. Okay, so now we're going to do our next step, which is toasting our pasta. And the reason we're toasting our pasta, this is something that Alex Reich does at Saint-Julie-Vert. The dish that they serve there is part tuna noodle casserole and part fideuà, which is this Spanish dish. It's like paella, but instead of rice, you make it with noodles, kind of like broken apart little pieces of noodles, which you toast first, the same way you would toast your rice before you make your paella. And what that does is it provides this really nutty, toasty flavor, and also gives the pasta a little bit more stability and sturdiness so it can stand up against a lot of sauce and a long cook time, which is what you need for paella, and also, coincidentally, what you need for this tuna noodle casserole. So it's a really good sort of like hybrid of those two dishes, and I think it's a really, really smart thing that she does there, so I'm really excited to be able to recreate it. I think for this recipe, something hollow is a really nice choice because all the sauce, bits of tuna, all the fun stuff can get trapped inside. It makes every bite like super awesome and delightful. I think mezze rigatoni is the perfect shape. It's very tubular. You see that nice hole where lots of stuff can get stuck, but it's short enough that it's not gonna cause too many problems while you're stirring. This is a similar size to like ditalli. If you went ditalini, that's like a little bit smaller, but same vibe. I think penne would work similarly because while it's skinnier, it's longer, so it kind of like makes up for it in both directions. I think these both make really good choices. You could go super small, like elbow macaroni style. I think that would work, but I just like the bite of the pasta. I think having that chew is really nice. And again, when you have this shape, you can have parts of it that get really crispy and parts of it that stay nice and tender depending on where it fits in the pan. And with these guys, you're not gonna get that same difference because they're just so small. And also in these tiny little holes, you might get some sauce the way you might get sauce in like bucatini or something, but you're not gonna get pieces of tuna, pieces of your sofrito caught in there. So here we go. We're gonna toast our pasta. So we need just a little bit of olive oil in the pan. We're gonna go on medium-low. And you're gonna work in batches if your pasta is too big of a shape for it to all fit at once. I think I'm gonna go twice through 2 batches. Start with half of our pasta here. You just want to kind of get it completely, each piece completely coated in the oil. And you'll see it start to turn after a couple of minutes, like a subtle golden-y brown on the edges. So for this guy, I just did about like 3 tablespoons of oil in the pan. If you do too much, oh, you can start to see it toasting on the sides there. You see that? Yeah, look at that, gorgeous. If you put too much in here, you're gonna fry your pasta, which is not what you're looking to do. You're just toasting it a little bit in oil. And you don't want too little because then you won't coat all of the pieces evenly and you run the risk of them getting too soggy later. We're just gonna move this pasta out of here. So we've got this sort of toasty, can you see these toasty edges here? Really nice, starting to get golden brown. And that tells me that it's taking on that sort of nutty, toasty flavor. You're probably not gonna get like a perfectly even golden brown on the whole of your pasta, which is okay because it kind of is a great textural element to have like some pieces be a little crispier and some pieces be a little softer. You just don't want a totally sogged out piece of pasta. Love it. Other half of our pasta.
Ian said, good lockdown recipe. I was interested in frying the pasta. That worked, though I don't see the point in wasting olive oil for that. Tend to use olive oil only for flavoring now.
Great note. Love a comment. Thank you so much. Thank you for making it. Because this dish has like very Spanish vibes, all the flavors are kind of like Spanish in origin, olive oil is like a tenet of Spanish cooking. So that flavor is really important here. Also in general, I tend to use olive oil all the time, unless I'm deep frying or something really necessarily calls for canola oil or vegetable oil, grapeseed oil, something like that. I'm gonna use olive oil. I think it just, that flavor you mentioned, it's great. And there's a reason why you cook with it. So it's a really good thing to add here. Okay, so while that's finishing up, we're gonna prep our next thing, which is tuna. Canned tuna is a spectacular pantry item. It keeps for a very long time. I'm always gonna go for oil packed. It's just much richer because it's sitting in this oil. Fish is fatty, but the sitting in the oil makes it fattier. It's just like so unctuous and delightful. And you can see the difference, right? This oil packed version is like kind of glistening and lovely, full of this oil that's really flavorful that you can use later. And this water packed version, still super flavorful, but it's much drier. Even though it's in the water, it's like drier and flakier. You can see that, right? Like the flakes are totally different than the flakes here, which are just more coated in oil and therefore a little bit more unctuous. And now we'll move our pasta into the bowl with its friends. We're just gonna use the olive oil that the tuna is packed in to cook our sofrito. So you just want about a couple tablespoons. So we're increasing our heat to medium and we're gonna add your oil. Woo! And I didn't have very much oil in my tuna can, and you want about 2 tablespoons, so I supplemented with a tablespoon of my regular olive oil. And you're gonna start with your anchovy. And so we use the tuna oil because that's a ton of flavor. That is oil that the tuna's just been sitting in, so it's been flavoring it this whole time. And you don't wanna put that to waste. If you just toss that, that would be such a bummer. Okay, so now we're adding our sofrito and a little bit of salt and pepper. And we're gonna fry this out for like 5 to 7 minutes, just until the vegetables get nice and soft. So we can see right now there's no give in the sort of like larger onion pieces. You can see there's still a little bit of, and like you can't even notice the anchovy at this point, right? It's just melted into this mixture. So it's just adding that sort of deep rumbly umami flavor at the bottom that you're not gonna like pick out when you take a bite. It's just like there, playing the bass line, doing great work. All right, I'm gonna go grab our tomato paste. These need a couple more minutes. We're gonna use 2 tablespoons here, and I'm just gonna eyeball that. 1, 2. And you can see it's getting a little darker. It's coloring our whole mixture here. We're gonna fry that out for like 3 minutes total, and you'll see the color change. If you've ever made spaghetti sauce, if you've ever made a ragu, you know that you've got to use more than 1 tomato product. The tomato paste is really concentrated. It's a punch of that tomato flavor, especially if you get like a double concentrated or triple concentrated brand, which is great. It just means it's been cooked down twice as much, 3 times as much. The canned tomatoes have that flavor, but they're also all that liquid, so it's much less concentrated. And so what you can do is you can make full tomato sauces just with tomato paste and add stock or water or whatever, because you're gonna have that flavor. But having both means you get the best of both worlds. You get those tomato juices and that punch of tomato flavor. We've got this nice toasty tomato paste that's fried out. You can smell it caramelizing, delightful. So we're gonna add our canned tomato product. We're gonna add 2.5 cups water. I'm gonna add about half of it and then add my pasta. So I can mix it in, and then I'm gonna add the other little bit of water. All right, so we've got our spices, water, and we are bringing our mixture to a boil, which you can see it's boiling right here. And we're gonna cook it for about 8 to 10 minutes before we move on. And what we're doing is essentially parboiling the pasta before we move it into the oven. Oh, I was also supposed to add salt and I didn't, so I'm just gonna add salt now, but we can pretend we added salt. The reason why you have to salt a recipe multiple times throughout the process and not just once at the beginning or once at the end is because salt makes every ingredient taste like itself. If you just add salt at the end, you're not gonna get that highlighting of each of the individual flavors, you're gonna taste the salt. So if you taste and season as you go, you won't taste salt, you'll taste each individual ingredient. Time after time, chefs will call for diamond crystal kosher salt. It is beloved, and that is because it is the perfect consistency. It's coarse, but not too coarse, and it's exactly the right situation saltiness-wise in terms of adding it to your dish throughout your cooking process. This is the salt that a lot of people have and try to use one for one, and you'll wonder why your food is so salty. Iodized salt is really fine. You can see comparison-wise, it's just like half as big, each individual grain. And that means you're gonna get way more saltiness in every single pinch. And a pinch of this is gonna go so much farther than a pinch of this. Maldon salt or flaky sea salt is a really great thing to have on hand for finishing dishes. You would never cook with this, you would never mix it into your baked good, but it's a perfect thing to finish your dish with to sprinkle right on top. All right, so we are there, my friends. We have arrived at our oven moment. Adding 1 more quarter cup of water, and then we're gonna add our tuna. The tuna is the star ingredient here. It might seem like it's the pasta, but it's really the tuna. This is great, oil-packed tuna. You just wanna break it sort of into pieces. I turned the heat off. There's some residual bubbling, but the stove is off. And you're adding it because this tuna is cooked. You are not trying to cook this tuna longer than you need to. We're gonna fold it in.
A great recipe. I had everything on hand except the roasted red bell peppers, so I used some sun-dried tomato pesto for depth of flavor. I also used rigatoni. I'd probably use a smaller tube pasta next time just because I found it challenging to stir the mixture without making a mess. But I loved the brown pasta. I think next time I'll add olives for some extra zing.
Fun, loving all your subs. You had most of the ingredients except for the roasted peppers. Great. That is the reason why I brought this recipe to Epicurious in the first place. It was early quarantine days and people were cooking out of their pantries, and we wanted to be developing recipes that relied heavily on pantry staples. So this doesn't have a lot of fresh ingredients. We're gonna have the parsley at the end, and you're gonna use some eggs, but mostly it's like canned tuna, canned tomato products, canned roasted red peppers. It's all stuff that you can just keep in your pantry for a long time, and then when the mood strikes you, you can open it up, grab all your things, and you're good to go. I've never had sun-dried tomato pesto, but it sounds good. You're definitely gonna get that same sweetness that you will from the peppers, so good choice. And you wanna add olives, love that. I think like a Castelvetrano olive in here, or even like a super salty, like black salt cured olive. Love it, I think that would be great. Very Spanish. Even capers, I would add capers. If you want like something briny, extra little bits, olives, capers, great move. Okay, everything's mixed up here. We're gonna add our extra little bit of water just to keep it from going too dry in the oven. So the reason we're moving from the stove to the oven, it kind of just congeals all those sauces and gives the pasta the opportunity to soak all of it up. You could do it on the stove, but it's just not gonna be as cohesive at the end. That's the reason why you gotta move it from the stove to the oven. So while that bakes off, we are going to make our aioli, which is fancy mayonnaise. Aioli is basically just oil, egg, salt, and garlic. The salt and the garlic is there to add that friction when you're emulsifying. So it's like the little bits of shallot or mustard seeds or something in your salad dressing when you're doing the same thing. So first thing is we're gonna separate our egg. We only need the yolk in our mayo. There we go. All right. Save this white for another use. If you are making lots of aioli, every summer when it's tomato toast season, I have to have aioli in my house in large quantities at all times. So I make like triple, double, even quadruple batches. And if you have a bunch of egg whites, you can make meringue. You can put it in certain cakes that call for a lot of egg whites. You can toss it on potatoes before you roast them for like a super crispy, crackly exterior. There are a lot of uses, so don't let this bad boy go to waste. So we're gonna grate our garlic clove. We're gonna add a pinch of salt. Again, just creating that friction in your emulsification. And we're gonna add a teaspoon of water. It just helps get things moving. We're gonna whisk this together, and then we're gonna slowly add oil. Now, emulsifying, what you do to make aioli, what you do to make a salad dressing, you're basically adding all this air into your mixture and suspending the oil in all of the other ingredients. The mixture ends up being thicker, it ends up being glossier, kind of like frosty, and it's paler in color too. You're gonna watch it lighten as we go. So we're adding about a half cup of olive oil, and we're gonna slowly add while we whisk. Like, look at this drizzle, the slowest drizzle of all of history. Just a little bit at a time, you're incorporating, you're adding all this air. If you flood your mixture with oil, it's not gonna incorporate. It's just gonna wanna separate immediately. So you just gotta go a little bit at a time and allow yourself a moment to incorporate that drizzle of oil before you add the next. So it's kind of just like constantly adding, incorporating as you go. And what's great about this is you know what an aioli looks like. You know what a mayo looks like. It's thick, it's spreadable. In this version, we like to keep it a little pourable, but still kind of like that plop that you recognize from mayonnaise. So you're gonna know when it's done. You don't have to be timing this. You don't have to be being too particular about how much oil you use. All right, we're almost there. All right. So great. So that's exactly the consistency if you imagine just like a really good mayo to dip your fries in. Yum. Love it. I'm gonna pull it. Here it goes. It's done. She's ready. Woo! See these little bubbles? Subtle gurgling. We love to see it. So last little thing we're gonna do, change our oven over from bake to broil on high if you have like a high-low broil situation. So now take our olive oil and just drizzle a bit over. Don't have to be particular about this. Basically that added fat is just gonna help crisp up the top layer. And also the flavor of olive oil is great. Okay, back into the oven she goes for just a couple of minutes. Don't forget about her while she's in there because when the broiler is on, the heat is only coming from the top. So it's kind of like if you are laying out sun tanning and you only stay in one direction and all the heat and all the sun is coming on one side, and that's what's happening. We are putting our tuna noodle casserole into suntan only from the top for a couple of minutes so it gets nice and crispy. Look at this. Look at this charry, crispy bits. It's so delightful. I could even go for more char than this, but this is a perfect medium. You can see it bubbling at the sides. You can hear it sizzling on the inside. I'm dying. Look at how perfect little crispy bits. I want to eat them. Last little thing is for a bit of freshness, and that's gonna come from our herbs. We're gonna use parsley. We're just gonna chop a little bit of it. You don't have to be finicky here. I'm just picking these guys off. A garnish, from my experience, it's so important. It provides so much flavor. And a dish like this really needs it, right? Because we don't have that fresh element. We don't have that bit that's gonna bring you back to life. This is like comfort food. And then you want a little bit of something that like makes it feel fresh and vibrant. All right, we're just gonna run a knife briefly through this. Don't have to be fancy and you don't have to make them too small of pieces either. All right, decor time. So we're just gonna scoop drizzles of this guy all over the place. And you can serve the rest of the aioli alongside. So if people wanna add more as they eat, which I definitely do. Nice, and then slee. Nice drizzle of it, sprinkling all over the top. Okay, we're gonna eat it now. I'm so ready for this. Okay, so just gonna take a big ol' scoop, try and get a little bit of everything, but obviously you can add more aioli. Oh my God, look at that. And more parsley as you go. Really juicy, gorgeous sauciness at the bottom. So don't sleep on the bottom. Ugh, yum. All right, a little bit of extras. You deserve it. A little more aioli on top. A little bit more parsley. Now what's awesome here is you've got these super crispy bits that were on the top here, super crunchy, you can see charred bits, and then these really juicy, unctuous bits that were at the bottom. It's this combination of textures that's so delightful and really easy to do if you just know when to put on your broiler. It's so good. It's like
I think it does this just a disservice to call it a tuna noodle casserole. Like, because the idea of that sounds so boring, and this is so flavorful, so delightful. The tuna just melts away. Yeah, huge fan.
Thanks so much for hanging out. I hope you've learned a little bit about why we made the decisions we did while making this dish, and you can make it at home. The recipe is in the description below, so click it and try it at home.